all, you're listening to Discover Your OT Path. My name is Riley Heiser, and I'm a student at IU Kokomo, currently enrolled in the Occupational Therapy Assist program. For my capstone project, I'm creating a podcast to help current students learn about the various settings available to them. Today we're diving into the setting of working at a school. I'm excited to be joined by Catherine Atkinson, who is currently a licensed OT. Before we dive in, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, Catherine?
Sure. I decided I wanted to be an OT when I was a junior in high school, and I just fell in love with it with an observation I was set up with. So I went to IU, where I finished my degree, and then I immediately started at Ball Memorial Hospital. I was originally hired as pediatrics and adult care, but my pediatric caseload grew really quickly, so I've pretty much only done pediatrics with occasionally doing PRN in adults or geriatrics. I now work with Muncie Community Schools. I was with Ball Memorial for 9 years, and I now work with Muncie Community Schools, but really the Delaware and Blackford County Special Education Co-op, but mostly in Muncie Community Schools. So I've been there now for 16 years. In a variety of different schools and school systems since I'm in a co-op.
All right, so it sounds like you go to a lot of different schools. So how exactly would you describe your workplace?
So it's a moving target, really, as far as the workplace itself. I do have a home office in one of my buildings, which is great. It's a big classroom, and I share that with another OT and a CODA, and that's where we keep all of our OT equipment for most of the district. And so we have loads of cabinets and stuff everywhere with all the equipment and things that we loan out to teachers and students. But then we work in whatever buildings we're assigned to, and so I personally use a wagon so that I always have materials and items with me that I need in order to work with kids.
That is nice. I'm sure the wagon comes in handy a lot.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that you work with other OTs and CODAs, but is there any other professions that you work with in your field?
All the time. So I work with PT and speech therapy as well. You don't work with them as often as if you were working in a clinic setting and their desk was right next to you, but we do try to collaborate as teams whenever we can. And then obviously I work with loads of teachers and teaching assistants. We have BCBAs and RBTs that work in the schools, and other just behavior interventionists and administrators, principals, assistant principals, depending on the day. And then our special ed administrators as well. So there's really a whole team to collaborate with.
So working with so many people, how do you feel like the energy kind of is whenever you work with other people and other professions?
I think it kind of depends on the day and everybody's stress level, but I definitely appreciate being able to bounce ideas off of other people, and having open communication is just going to be key. I always tell teachers, I'm never going to be upset if you tell me about what's happening, because I'm only here one day a week and you're with that kid every day, and so let's problem solve together. So if they're having a struggle, I want to hear about it, and we need to work together as a team and try to problem solve together.
Yeah. Whenever you meet with teachers, do you usually have like set times, or is it kind of like a chaotic energy where you just kind of go where you can at the time?
As far as meeting with them about the students, oftentimes, depending on the type of setting, if it's a general education setting and I'm pulling the students from the classroom, a lot of times I'll just find the teachers when I know their kids are in specials or at lunch, and I know I can just talk to them briefly that way. And then if it's in a special education classroom that's more of a separate class placement, I often will talk with them as I'm working with the students as things come up, or just afterwards we'll just meet in their classroom quietly off to the side.
Nice. So I'm very interested in working in peds, so I think that your setting sounds absolutely amazing, but obviously nothing can be perfect. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in this setting?
I think if I just compared it to an outpatient setting, outpatient can be stressful too, because you're working back to back with students all day long, and then you have evaluations and that paperwork. But that's pretty much how most days and weeks go in a clinic-based setting. And right previous experience. In a school, the stress can be a little more different and cyclical because we make our own schedule and there are all those tasks to do, and you have to find a way to prioritize it yourself. And you may not have any conferences for a couple weeks, and then one week you have 5 or 6, and you still have to see the kids and do all the paperwork and go to meetings and that kind of thing. Evaluations are another kind of cyclical thing. It just depends on how many you've got going at that moment. Now, our boss has helped us with prioritizing how things get done. In our case, a 50-day timeline on an evaluation is a higher priority than getting treatments done, because you can always make treatment time up later, whereas you can never make up an evaluation deadline if you miss it.
Yeah.
So I think that just some of that cyclical stress and then the extra things that come up are what cause the most stress in a setting like the schools, but that definitely will keep you on your toes too.
On those tough days, is there anything that you do that can help make it easier?
Yeah, I think kind of talking with other staff members about what they've done and problem solve with teachers, or even just venting a little bit. Hey, I'm struggling today. I've got a lot to do. I'm gonna have to work late and that kind of thing. I think just that's the beauty of a team approach, is you've always got people who can encourage you on a hard day.
Yeah, that's super nice. So now, on the opposite side of that, what do you absolutely love about this setting?
I think, personally, I feel like OT in general, but my job in the schools has been a blessing in my life because it's a way I can serve. You can make the difference in children's lives working directly with them, or even doing consultation with the teacher. And if you can make some good recommendations and changes and make their job at school easier as kids, then you've done your job. You can also make a difference for teachers, even just encouraging and coaching on what a disability is, and helping manage expectations, because then the teachers feel like they're doing a better job, and it can be very fulfilling for them too. So I feel very, very blessed to have my job. And again, there's that opportunity to serve and see change happen and transformation, not even if it's in the way you expect it to be. Seeing some of those gifts be unwrapped in kids is really, really powerful.
Yeah. Hi guys, we're going to take a little break from the interview, and I'm going to ask an NBCOT question. A 7-year-old child with ADHD has difficulty completing written assignments. The teacher reports the child frequently leaves their seat, rushes through work with poor legibility, and disrupts peers during independent work time. What is the most appropriate initial intervention? A. Provide a weighted vest during all classroom activities. B. Collaborate with the teacher to implement structured movement breaks and visual work expectations. C. Recommend placement in a separate classroom. Or D. Reduce the length of all written assignments permanently. And the correct answer is B. Collaborate with the teacher to implement structured movement breaks and visual work expectations. B is correct because structured movement breaks and clear visual expectations support self-regulation, attention, and classroom participation without removing the child from the least restrictive environment. A may help some children, but weighted vest should not be the first line or universal intervention without an assessment and some data. C is too restrictive and is not justified at this stage. And then D reduces academic demands rather than supporting skills of development and participation. And now we're going back to the interview. Yeah. I know I got to do my field work with you, so you helped me change how I saw school-based, because I thought it was mostly just like handwriting, and to see that it could be so much more, it was so nice. But what do you think is something else that people on the outside might not expect when working in this profession?
Yeah, so working in the schools, like you just said, is about so much more than handwriting. I love working on handwriting and all the skills underlying it, but I love, well, if we just use handwriting as the example, looking at all those underlying skills, those performance components, and trying to pick it apart a little bit and figure out what's the driving force behind a deficit, and then really work on that and help a teacher to see that and work on it to make some better gains than what you would what you would have made without that. But then I think people would be surprised by how much sensory processing needs, or how many needs there are out there in the general population and the special ed population, and in any area of OT, especially these days, the psychiatric needs that are out there. I think people would be surprised by the anxiety that's out there in kids, and then those psychiatric needs, and what you can do with sensory, even if it's not a sensory issue, but things you can do with sensory activities to support that. And that being said, that's not always kids who get OT. Some of that's kind of a school-wide impact that you can have if you have the time to educate teachers a little bit.
Yeah, and I meant to ask this a little bit earlier, just to backtrack a little bit. You had mentioned consultations with students. So how exactly did those go?
So it depends on the setting a little bit. Like at the high school, for example, most of the time you would expect students to be on consultation as they're in middle school and high school, because of that rehab potential for younger kids. You want to really hit those skills hard when they're young, and that rehab potential is good. But then as they get older, we're looking to accommodate a little more than treat and work to remediate those skills. And that way kids can show what they know rather than like what their fine motor skills are or what their sensory skills are. So for a high school kiddo, if they're in general education, I'm probably going to pull them and talk to them a little bit, see what's needed, if there's anything happening. And then usually my teacher of record is who I reach out to, because those high school kids probably have 7 or 8 teachers. Yeah. So that teacher of record is who my contact is, and they're in communication with all those other teachers. And if anything comes up, then they talk with me about that, and I get that taken care of. In the special ed classrooms, I generally just go into the classroom during random times. I don't schedule those consultations. I generally pick random times, and then I see different groups of kids in different places and teachers with different kids and all that, because those kids move around during the day too. But then I generally get to lay eyes on most of those kids pretty easily.
Yeah, so for any students or any listeners who might be considering a similar career of work environment, what kind of person do you think thrives here? So like, if you could give me 3 traits that you think would really fit in at this setting.
Top would be flexibility. You might walk into a building thinking you're about to sit down and work with Joey, and then you find out that Bobby down the hall is having a behavior, and it might be due to something sensory. You might need to go handle that. Or you might go in thinking you're about to work with groups, and in my case, I have training on safety and car seats and transportation. I might get a call that I have to go fix a wheelchair, or the bus won't transport a child that day. So flexibility is absolutely key. And then we don't schedule our conferences, so you have to kind of work around everybody else's schedules. And so flexibility is definitely a big one. And then creativity, being able to walk into a classroom and try to be creative and get those kiddos doing what you need them to do. And then creative and fun, because you want to be the fun one. You want to be working on activities that they need to work on to build skills, but it should be fun when you're doing that. So that takes creativity. And then I think being a good coach and an encourager for staff and kids, kind of being a great cheerleader is good too, because our job is to build people up. And if you're not in there every day, you need to be able to do that during that short period of time when you're there.
Yeah.
So I would say flexibility, creativity, and cheerleading.
That is good. I really like that. So what advice would you give somebody who's stepping into this type of position?
I think being able to have people you can talk to, other therapists, even if you have to set that up in a creative way, Zoom meetings, that kind of thing, that contact with other therapists is good. And being willing to step in as part of a team with teachers, communicate openly with them and be really open with them up front about that. Just, hey, I want to be a part of your team. I want to be a support to you and the kids. And once teachers understand that, usually you get much better follow through with things you want to recommend and that kind of thing. Whereas if therapists walk in and they're just like, no, you need to do this, and they get really bossy, it doesn't go as well. Yeah. So I think stepping in and being willing to be a humble, kind, encouraging part of that team, you get better results.
Yeah. All right. So before we finish up here today, is there anything else you'd like to share about your work setting, or maybe just an experience that you've had that you feel like you should share?
Sure. I think again, that flexibility piece is needed in so many ways. Another way would be, I mentioned I have an office, but when I go into a building, sometimes there's no other place to work. So you're working in the hallway. Therapists have worked in closets, that kind of thing. I'm usually working in classrooms with students, but I've definitely had my share of times in the hallway and that kind of thing. But again, it's about you and the student, and so the place doesn't really matter. So there's just another one of those ways being flexible is going to help. And yeah, I would say seeing that you're trying to help the whole team and the student. And the other thing would be, I see a lot of people assuming that negative behavior is a child making a choice. And oftentimes it's a form of communication or a skill deficit causing that behavior. So OTs do have a unique perspective and need to use that. I try not to step on any behavior person's toes, but we can absolutely collaborate well with them with our perspectives and observations on sensory and fine motor.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for letting us know all about working in a school. We really appreciated you being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you to everyone for listening. Be sure to follow along for the next episode where we'll be doing things a little bit different, as we are going to have more of a compare and contrast type episode because we have someone who specializes in lymphedema and has worked at an oncology rehab clinic, hospital long-term acute care, and just in the hospital rehab.